President Barack Obama.
Left unchecked, we have every reason to believe that Gaddafi would commit atrocities against his people. Many thousands could die. A humanitarian crisis would ensue. The entire region could be destabilized, endangering many of our allies and partners.
President Obama says Mr. Gaddafi's troops must stop attacking civilians, halt military action against Benghazi and other cities, and allow humanitarian supplies to reach the civilian population.
These terms are not subject to negotiation. If Gaddafi does not comply with the resolution, the international community will impose consequences, and the resolution will be enforced through military action.
Mr. Obama made no reference to Mr. Gaddafi's offer Friday of a ceasefire. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton appeared skeptical.
The first and overwhelmingly urgent action is to end the violence. And we have to see a very clear set of decisions that are operationalized on the ground by Gaddafi's forces to move physically a significant distance away from the east, where they have been pursuing their campaign against the opposition.
Clinton says a no-fly zone over Libya would involve bombing targets like anti-aircraft missiles and radar installations. She says Mr. Gaddafi has lost his legitimacy and must relinquish power.
We do believe that a final result of any negotiations would have to be the decision by Colonel Gaddafi to leave. But let's take this one step at a time.
Problem here is that I don't think the Security Council has exhausted all peaceful options. And I think that the problem is, in general, that the concept of humanitarian intervention, as we pointed out before, is very politicized. It's used very selectively, and it has in history been used by great powers only in those countries where they have some particular interest, where they want to use armed force. So I think the world and the Libyan people should be very suspicious about either a no-fly zone or any other form of military intervention here.
If a massacring of innocent civilians is the criterion, didn't Israelis did exactly the same in 2008, 2009? Did the so-called international community establish no-flight zone over Israel or Gaza? Didn't United States did precisely the same in Iraq in the aftermath of the Iraqi invasion? Did the international community establish no-flight zone over the American air bases? What we have here is United States, the same country, the same government, and UK, the same government and the same state that has been providing arms to Libyan government, to Muammar Gaddafi, now turning around and saying, no, we're going to support another body that, by the way, is not a democratic representation.
On Friday,
We're joined now by Yoshi Drezen, senior correspondent with National Journal, who has a story in this week's issue called The Prisoner's Dilemma about the Obama administration's decision to end its plans to close Guantanamo Bay, the detention center down there. Yoshi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So just to get started, here we are 2 years after President Obama said he would close Gitmo, 1 year after it was supposed to be closed. It's still open for business. Was this naive of the president and his advisors to think that they could actually do this?
I think it was, but I think part of it also was that at the time they said they were going to close it, everyone wanted to close it. If you remember, President Bush wanted to close it and spoke about that publicly. Robert Gates, who was then President Bush's defense secretary, the way he now is President Obama's, wanted to close it. General Petraeus wanted to close it. John McCain wanted to close it. So it may have been naivete by the president, but it was also naivete perhaps by a lot of his other Republican opponents.
And one thing you document in this story, it's a fascinating read, is that really the conventional wisdom in Washington and in legal circles has changed on this. Now there's emerging consensus that Gitmo really needs to be there.
Yeah, and that in reporting it is what I found personally most interesting. The logic people have now is that because Guantanamo Bay has been open, it has been transparent, it's been looked at so closely by NGOs, by lawmakers, by journalists, it's a much more transparent place than it was a couple of years ago. and that if you were to close it, there really isn't a better solution. Politically, there's not much of a chance that Republicans in Congress would allow for prisoners from Guantanamo to be moved to the United States. Legally, if you move people to Bagram in Afghanistan or other bases outside of the mainland U.S., the prisoners would lose the rights that they have. So no one likes Guantanamo. It's not that people are enthusiastic, but the feeling is it's better than anything else.
You mentioned in the story about how the Thompson Correctional Center in Illinois, that was the White House's idea where they could start transferring detainees. The money just isn't going to happen there. Is that completely dead now once the funding isn't there? Do you think the White House will try and keep pushing, chipping away?
No, I think it's completely dead. And in fact, what you're going to see in the next couple of days will be an announcement from Secretary Gates from the Pentagon, Eric Holder from the Justice Department, of new rules that will allow for even more military commission proceedings at Guantanamo. So it's not just that it's not going to be closed, it's that you're going to see the pace of activity there accelerate pretty rapidly in the very near future.
That's right. And of course, Yoshi, this was a key campaign promise that it doesn't look like the President and the White House are going to keep it. According to this, maybe for the entirety of the term. Yoshi Dresden from National Journal, we appreciate you being with us. Again, the cover.
Basically was an investigator. I wouldn't say a full-scale journalist, but definitely someone who was investigating what was going on in Pakistan. And the issue is that the threats have been made against the source and the source's family. So it has to do with immigration status because of the nature of the person's immigration status.
Was this somebody they were using as an interpreter or something?
Yeah, these are not people born in the United States. These are naturalized U.S. citizens.
And have you met face to face with this person?
I have.
Because I know every time I'm watching C-SPAN, they're having a national security hearing. I can see you there in the gallery, and I know you frequent the press club. I mean, because if the system knows who they are, I mean, I guess they're not going public because they've been threatened. Hey, we're going to deport you if you talk about this. But I'd think they're in great danger, just like I told the D.C. madam this, and many others that have been killed, if they don't go public.
Right, and that may happen eventually, but at the present time, of course, the FBI and the CIA are on their, in their threatening mode. And
of course, you met with the D.C. madam right before they killed her.
I did, and I begin to think that if I meet somebody, it's not a good thing for them, but definitely this government, I mean, we say Obama and Bush, I mean, there's no change between the Bush administration and the Obama administration when it comes to this type of harassment of individuals who have witnessed things overseas.
So from your source, as much as you can tell us that a lot's in the report, but as much as you can tell us, I mean, is XC arming one group and then they're attacking others? Or, I mean, specifically, what did they say that they witnessed XC do?
Basically, XC being responsible for terrorist attacks inside Pakistan that are then blamed in all the press releases and information coming out of the U.S. government being blamed on the Pakistani Taliban. And we've had some cases where the Pakistani Taliban has not claimed responsibility, but there's also a distinct possibility that people are claiming responsibility in the name of the Pakistani Taliban after these U.S. mercenaries conduct these terrorist operations to make it look like.
And the Pakistani Taliban's coming out and saying, we're not doing this.
Absolutely. In some cases, that's exactly right. I mean, they're trying, of course, to gain popularity within Pakistan. And now there's reports coming out that the Taliban, Pakistani Taliban, was providing aid to all these millions and millions of flood victims when, in fact, the Pakistani government wasn't even responding to their needs. So they're not interested, I don't think, in killing people when the Pakistani government, by default, did a lot of killing by not providing immediate assistance to the flood victims.
Well, it's the old divide and conquer. Get these different religious and sectarian groups stirred up, killing each other. I go back to that Army manual that WikiLeaks released 2 years ago, and the Pentagon admitted, yeah,
Pakistan has strongly condemned a U.S. drone attack which killed more than 3 dozen people near the Afghan border. Pakistani General Kayani says the missiles struck a peaceful meeting of tribal elders in Data Khel in North Waziristan. He says the attack was callous and a violation of human rights.
We have been at this for 10 years. We have spent an enormous amount of money.
Look, we're spending $2 billion a week in Afghanistan. Imagine what we could do in America if we spent $2 billion here.
We have spent an enormous amount of money.
Estimates are that it costs $1 million per soldier per year to keep troops in Afghanistan.
We have spent an enormous amount of money.
About $375 billion has already been spent on the Afghan war. This doesn't include basic things like care for soldiers in the future.
We have spent an enormous amount of money. We have sustained very tough losses and difficult life-changing wounds.